Mr. Pedersen rightly pointed to the massive legacy of conflict and civil strife, the imperative of economic and political stability driven by genuine inclusion and dialogue. And he also referred to external intervention by Israel, terming it unacceptable and that it must stop. And in this council, we know very well how this issue of foreign interference intertwined with occupation has been a perennial problem and a key destabilizing factor that manifests itself across the situations in the Middle East. Related to the above is the fact that Syria's stability is inseparable from the question of security, which remains twofold. On the one hand, the security situation in areas such as Suweda, the western coast, and the northeast remains fragile and demands a healing touch and action-oriented approach. We welcome the efforts by Syria, Jordan, and the United States aimed at stabilizing Suweda and the south of Syria. On the other hand, the persistent threat posed by terrorist groups continues to endanger not only Syria but the wider region. The presence of foreign terrorist fighters underscores the urgency of this challenge. These concerns must be addressed comprehensively through both political and security measures, including the implementation of the disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration reforms. Fourth, all forms of external aggression against Syria must cease, and the occupation of Syrian territory post 8 December 2024 must be reversed. The occupation of the Syrian Golan must also end in full compliance with international law and Security Council resolutions. The 1974 disengagement agreement should be strictly adhered to, and any new security arrangements must have the consent of the concerned parties and the endorsement of the Security Council.
I now give the floor to the representative of Turkey.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would also like to Special Envoy Pedersen, USG Fletcher, and Ms. Çorbacı, Ehren. Syrian government has made remarkable progress since last December, despite the scale of challenges. Rehabilitation projects in infrastructure are already underway, and access to electricity in the country has improved. Reconstruction process will only accelerate once all natural resources come under the control of the Syrian government for the benefit of the whole Syrian people. We are encouraged to observe that Syria's engagement with the international community is advancing on a steady and constructive path. Participation of the Syrian president in the UN General Assembly during high-level week will be of enormous importance in reinforcing this engagement. Turkey will continue to support lifting of all sanctions as the Syrian government pursues its reconstruction agenda. Mr. President, the new period in Syria requires sustained efforts to ensure peace and stability on the basis of its territorial integrity and unity. A Syria that has reestablished its sovereignty, territorial integrity, and stability is also key to preventing wider security risks. Empowering the Syrian government is essential to achieving this goal. From the outset, Turkey has facilitated mobilization of regional and international efforts to engage with the new government. It is important not to lose sight of the need to secure stability and security. Syrian government is committed to improving the safety and security of the country of all its people, and this should be supported. In this regard, we welcome the roadmap announced by Syria, Jordan, and the United States with the objective of preserving calm, ensuring stability, and preventing renewed conflict in Suweda province. Turkey will support initiatives that promote peace, security, and stability for all components in the Syrian society. But It is also essential for Israel to reconsider its policy of aggression, of keeping Syria weak and fragmented, and to recognize that Syria's stability also serves for the security of all in the region.
Activism and advocacy for women in Syria. I also welcome the participation of the new permanent representative of the Syrian Arab Republic in today's meeting. Welcome to the Council. Ahla wa sahla. Mr. President, as we reflect on the past 9 months in Syria, it is clear that much progress has been made. Syria is a very different country than before December 8. Much remains to be done, but it has made significant strides for its people, its stability, and its future. We look forward to President al-Shaara's participation in the General Assembly next week, which we hope will mark the new beginning of a new and stronger relationship between Syria and the United Nations, a relationship which supports a new framework for the UN's presence in the country. Mr. President, in this spirit, allow me to focus on 3 core areas. First, priority must be given to implementing an inclusive and transparent political process in line with Resolution 2254. We hope that the selection of candidates to the People's Assembly will be the first of many steps towards democracy. This new People's Assembly needs to be generally inclusive of all Syrians, including Syria's women, as we just heard. Without the full, equal, and meaningful participation of Syrian women in the transitional process, it will not only lack legitimacy, but also lack the input of more than half of Syria's population. It's not only the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do. We also urge for the elections to the People's Assembly in Soweto and in the Kurdish areas to be organized as soon as possible. Second, Mr. President, the internal security situation remains highly volatile. We urge the transitional government to demonstrate to its people that it's able to control and rein in all armed forces under its command. This is crucial for the sense of trust and security of all Syrians, regardless of ethnicity, religion, or gender. In northeast Syria, we urge the transitional government and SDF to engage in further dialogue to move forward in implementing the agreement from March. The UN has offered assistance in mediation in this regard. Last month, this Council spoke with one voice condemning the attacks in Soweto. Denmark reiterates the condemnation forcefully today. We take note of yesterday's roadmap towards security in Soweto and trust that its transitional government continues to ensure credible, swift, transparent, and impartial investigations in line with international standards. We reiterate our deep concern over Israel's strikes on Syrian territory, including Damascus, which creates a more dangerous security landscape. We also reiterate our call for the full implementation of the 1974 agreement between Syria and Israel. Israel must withdraw from the area of separation, and UNDAF must be able to carry out its mandate. Third, Mr. President, progress must be made to improve the humanitarian situation affecting communities across Syria, which are facing increasing challenges regarding access to livelihoods and services. The fundamental reason for this is obvious: decades of economic mismanagement and 14 years of devastating conflict. Added to this is the severe economic crisis, along with housing, land, and property issues. As we heard from Ms. Shubaji, harnessing the full potential of Syria's population, including its women, will be critical in reviving and developing its economy. Denmark will continue to play its part. We have long been and remain committed as a major donor to Syria. We urge all member states to join us to increase their financial assistance to humanitarian efforts rather than the funding cuts we heard USG Fletcher describe. Mr. President, in closing, the path ahead for Syria will not be simple nor without hardship, but it can be transformative. The international community, including this Council, must support it along the way. We owe this to the Syrian people who suffered so much and fought so hard to get where we are today. Denmark looks forward to working with all Council members and with Syria to this end. I thank you.
For the statement, I now give the floor to the representative of Islamic Republic of Iran.
In the name of God, the compassionate and merciful, thank you, Mr. President. We thank a special envoy, Mr. Peterson, and Under Secretary, Mr. Fletcher, for their informative and insightful briefing. We have taken note of the statement delivered by Ms. Majed Chulbagia. On the situation in Syria, I wish to make the following points. First, on the humanitarian situation. The humanitarian situation in Syria is dire and continues to deteriorate. Critical funding shortfalls threaten life-saving aid operations, leaving millions of Syrians vulnerable. We commend OCHA, UN agencies, and humanitarian partners for their tireless effort to deliver assistance under extremely difficult circumstances. Full, safe, rapid, and unhindered humanitarian access to all affected communities in strict accordance with the principles of humanity, neutrality, impartiality, and independence is essential. Beyond the urgent need for humanitarian relief, Syria continues to confront profound economic challenges and an escalating food crisis, inflation, devastated infrastructure, broken supply chain, energy shortage, and recurring drought threaten the very survival of millions. These hardships are the direct result of years of unilateral coercive measures imposed in Syria, measures that are illegal, illegitimate, and in blatant violation of the Charter of the United Nations. These illegal measures gravely hinder recovery, obstruct reconstruction, and exacerbate the suffering of the Syrian people. They must be lifted in their entirety without condition to allow Syria to rebuild its economy, restore livelihood, and enable the safe and dignified return of refugees and internally displaced persons. Sanctions must never be used as an instrument of political coercion or interference in Syrian internal affairs. Second, on the security situation. The ceasefire arrangement remains fragile, while insecurity persists in Syria and other regions. Terrorist groups such as Daesh, Al-Qaeda, and affiliated foreign terrorist fighters continue to destabilize Syria and the wider region, seriously undermining regional and international peace and security. The Security Council must also not ignore the ongoing destabilizing and aggressive action of the Israeli regime in Syria. Iran emphasized that all foreign occupation must end. Israel's act of aggression, including repeated airstrikes against Syrian territory, constitute flagrant violation of international law and the Charter of the United Nations. The Council must not remain silent on these violations. Third, on the political process. Lasting peace and stability in Syria can only be achieved through a comprehensive Syrian-owned and Syrian-led political process, free from foreign interference and coercion. This process must be genuinely inclusive of all communities. Excluding key groups would only deepen graveness, undermine legitimacy, and risk destabilizing an already fragile situation. Such a process must safeguard the legitimate rights and aspirations of all Syrians, while preserving Syrian sovereignty, independence, unity, and national institutions. In this context, we support the recent diplomatic engagement of the Special Envoy with Syrian authorities in Damascus regarding the inclusive political transition. Fourth, on the Iran principal position, we reiterate that the sovereignty, unity, and territorial integrity of Syria must be fully respected. Any attempts to impose external agendas or fragment the country is unacceptable. We are concerned by agendas or demands for federalization or autonomy. Mishandled, these aspirations could fuel fragmentation and renewed conflict. Address responsibility through an inclusive national dialogue under the auspices of the United Nations. They could instead contribute to reconciliation and stability. Iran will continue to support the Syrian people and their efforts to restore peace, stability, reconstruction, and national reconciliation, fully in the line with the will of the Syrian people themselves. I thank you, Mr. President.
Second, we reiterate the importance of an inclusive, Syrian-led and Syrian-owned political process. It is essential that Syrians themselves determine the fate of their country. Legislative elections represent an important milestone, but they must be organized carefully and inclusively and in a manner that ensure credibility and legitimacy. Third, the international community, and in particular the United Nations, has a crucial role to play in supporting Syria throughout its transition. The A3+ calls for constructive engagement between the UN and the Syrian authorities and reaffirms its strong support for the United Nations and the work of the Special Envoy. Fourth, external interference can only aggravate Syria's fragile situation. The A3+ calls on all regional and international actors to refrain from actions that could further destabilize the country. We strongly condemn Israel's military operations, which constitute a blatant violation of international law, including Article 2 of the United Nations Charters. We also call for the full implementation of the 1974 disengagement agreement and recall that the occupied Golan Heights is an integral part of Syria, as reaffirmed by Security Council Resolution 497. We demand an immediate end to Israeli incursion and the complete withdrawal from the occupied territory. Fifth, the humanitarian needs in Syria remain immense, while support is insufficient, despite the effort of OCHA. Rebuilding Syria requires the mobilization of the entire international community. Yes, the lifting of sanctions is a welcome step, but it is not enough. Without adequate assistance, refugees and displaced persons will be unable to return home, and Syria will not be able to reconnect with development and prosperity. The A3+ calls all donors to honor their pledges and urges the international community to extend meaningful and sustained support to Syria. President, at this critical juncture, the A3+ reaffirms its unwavering support for Syria's sovereignty, unity, independence, and territorial integrity. We remain fully convinced that only a Syrian-led and Syrian-owned process, supported by genuine international solidarity, can pave the way toward realizing the aspirations of Syrian people.
I now give the floor to the representative of Slovenia.
Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to thank Special Envoy Pedersen and Under-Secretary General Fletcher for their briefings, as well as Ms. Maj Shorbaji, representing civil society, for her remarks. I also extend warm welcome to the newly appointed permanent representative of Syria, Ambassador Olabi. I wish you every success, and I assure you of my country's full support. Mr. President, the ambassador's appointment offers us a glimpse of what a new Syria could look like. After long shadows, hope is rising. A vision of a Syria where the scars of war are not forgotten, but serve to shape a better future for all Syrians. Allow me to make 3 points. First, the pain endured by the Syrian people over the past 14 years under Assad's rule has been immense. We understand deep frustration with the inaction of the international community. Yet while injustice is impossible to forget, it is time to try to look beyond that. Multilateralism ensures collective security where every country has a voice. As firm believers in this principle, we strongly support a renewed partnership, a reset between the United Nations and Syria, and stand ready to help make it a reality. Second, we acknowledge steps taken by the transitional authorities, including the current formation of the People's Assembly as a legislative body. Transparency and genuine inclusion, along with pluralism, remain essential for any lasting political transition, in line with Resolution 2254. In this regard, the full, equal, and meaningful participation of women must be guaranteed. We strongly condemn recent atrocities and sectarian targeting of civilians in Soweto, Latakia, and elsewhere. Equal protection from the state, accountability, and transitional justice, in line with international standards, must be central to national efforts. Long-term stability also requires comprehensive security sector reform and credible disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration programs. We encourage the interim authorities to continue cooperation with the United Nations and civil society, whose expertise will be crucial for a just and lasting peace. We welcome the roadmap between Syria, Jordan, and the United States aimed at resolving the crisis in Soweto province. We again urge all actors to respect Syria's sovereignty, territorial integrity, and unity, and to refrain from any actions that could escalate conflict or prolong human suffering. External military interventions risk destabilizing Syria and the wider region. This is in no one's interest. We join those who condemn the latest Israeli attacks on targets in Homs and Latakia. We reiterate our call to Israel to fully respect the 1974 disengagement agreement. Third, violence must end and civilians must be protected. We are deeply concerned by reports of sectarian violence and the implications of continuing hostilities and extensive damage on the prospects of recovery, particularly its disproportionate impact of women and girls. Continued efforts will help counter hate speech and the spread of disinformation, reduce polarization, and promote reconciliation and mutual understanding among Syria's diverse communities. And finally, urgent humanitarian needs are still a reality for millions of people. This year's devastating drought may increase the number of food insecure people. Remaining hostilities are driving further displacement. Among the most vulnerable are women and girls, who face an increased risk of gender-based and sexual violence in conditions of displacement, depravity, and insecurity. It is imperative that aid reaches all in need swiftly, safely, and without obstruction. We support the tireless efforts of the United Nations, especially Special Envoy Pedersen, whose role remains essential in supporting an inclusive, Syrian-led and Syrian-owned political process. We stand ready to work with Syria, this Council, and the international community to support a peaceful, stable, and prosperous future one the Syrian people waited for so long and so rightfully deserve. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Slovenia for the statement.
To the presence of the new Syrian ambassador, Mr. Ibrahim Olabi. Mr. Olabi, we welcome you to the Council as you strive for a new Syria at the UN. Mr. President, I want to highlight 3 points today. First, the vision of a new Syria will only be realized once a truly inclusive political transition has been achieved. Syria is a country of a tremendous wealth, a wealth that lies in its ethnic, religious, and cultural diversity. After years of suffering, all Syrians deserve a country in which they feel protected, safe, and included. In this context, we took careful note of the announcement of the selection of 2/3 of the country's legislative council by regional electoral committees. New legislative structures need to ensure democratic legitimacy and a fair representation for all. We regret the security conditions that led to the suspension of the electoral process in the Druze-dominated Shweida and the Kurdish-controlled governorates. We expect the political transition to include all Syrians, Muslims, Christians, Druze, Kurds, and importantly, women. It is clear that only if all religious and ethnic groups feel safe and politically represented can Syria move forward in its path for reconciliation, social cohesion, and economic development. It is encouraging in this regard that Syria's transitional president met with the Patriarch of Antioch last month, the leader of a community which has suffered a lot, especially in the Mar Elias church terrorist attack this summer. Which brings me to my second point. Syria's volatile security landscape must be properly addressed, especially as the terrorist threat persists. Perpetrators of violence, regardless of affiliation, must be brought to justice in line with international norms. We welcome the roadmap agreed by Syria, Jordan, and the US on restoring stability in Shweida, expecting full accountability. Similarly, the report of the UN Commission of Inquiry on violations committed against civilians in coastal and western central Syria earlier this year must be followed up. We urge the interim authorities to do so. Equally, we hope that genuine progress on the implementation of the March agreement between Damascus and the SDF will be made possible. This in the context of wider efforts to assure safety and inclusivity for all Syrians. All regional actors must respect international law, refraining from incitement, threat, or the use of force, as well as malign influence or interference. Third, Syria needs to rebound as its economy is currently in disarray and humanitarian needs remain urgent. Aware of the challenges on the ground, the EU was swift in lifting sanctions in line with a gradual and reversible approach. It also introduced new listings under the EU Global Human Rights Sanctions regime, targeting those responsible for serious human rights abuses. Syria needs to be rebuilt for the refugees and to return home, involving the diverse and wealthy Syrian diaspora to this end is necessary. In this sense, we reaffirm Syria's unity, independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity, urging all to respect it fully. Mr. President, with the 80th session of the United Nations General Assembly now upon us, Syria stands at crossroads. We look forward to the address of Syria's transitional president next week, certainly a significant milestone in the country's history. We will remain hopeful, but also vigilant, especially about a new Syria which is inclusive for all and free from foreign interference. Greece stands at the side of the Syrian people and the United Nations along this path. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Greece for the statement